Sarah very much enjoyed being a housewife. Her childhood after her parents passed away was unfulfilling and left her without a purpose. Serving her husband healed that part of her. Yes, some of the household chores were tedious, but she completed her tasks with a smile on her face. She was important to the survival of her home, and that was enough for her. The only negative was that her swollen body was slowing her down. She felt blessed to be growing she and Atticus's child, but was beginning to feel rather useless as she waddled around their land. Her favorite part of being a housewife was cooking new and delicious recipes. Her husband found her an old cookbook in his impressive book collection, so she made one new recipe a day. It was a nice way to challenge herself, especially in her condition. It helped her to feel better about herself. Sarah most enjoyed trying the new recipes. She had gained a sweet tooth during her pregnancy, so the new recipes satiated the craving. Atticus tried the dishes when he could, but he was busy with the chickens during the day. Unfortunately, not every new recipe agreed with her, and she often had to run to the restroom to vomit. Morning sickness was part of her daily routine. Atticus realized that he didn't have a photograph of Tommy. He tried to channel his inner Tommy by attempting to draw him. This brought him great comfort, but he wouldn't stop until he got it right. Sarah began nesting quite early on in her pregnancy. She had learned to knit at a young age from her mother, but was very out of practice. She had to relearn much of the pastime, but felt her mother with her with every stitch. In the mornings, Atticus would sit with his wife while he read the morning newspaper. They seldom spoke during this time, but it was a silence that Sarah welcomed every morning. It showed that Atticus cared about her. After some time, Atticus got back into reading. He hadn't opened a book since Tommy, and forgot how much joy he got from it. He was busy with tending to their land, but tried to read one book a week to keep his mind sharp. Atticus took on yet another task on their land, and for once, it was not for selfish reasons. He knew how much his wife enjoyed and took pride in her garden, so he tended to it when Sarah was too tired. He could see why Sarah was so enthralled with it. He was a very calming activity for him. He did so at night as a way to wind down for the evening. He wanted his wife to be proud of the garden's progress. Atticus was suffering from insomnia, so when he couldn't sleep, he read. It was a nice escape for him to read about the lives of others. He sometimes wished he was a character in the books and was far away from his own life. Atticus woke up early in the morning before the sun rose. His dreams were always plagued with memories of Tommy, and it deeply upset him every single morning. After the initial sadness wore off, he got to work on a woodworking piece. His newest project was building a crib for their little bundle of joy. He desperately wanted to be a good father. He figured building a bassinet with his own two hands was a good start. Time went by so quickly for Sarah, and before she knew it, she was in her second trimester. Her belly grew more and more each week, and she would soon have a baby to love and cherish. It was a bittersweet time for her because she absolutely loved being pregnant. She and Atticus would just have to have lots of babies so she could be pregnant often. Sarah and Atticus bonded over the pregnancy. What Atticus lacked in love for his wife, he made up for in love for their unborn child. He eagerly felt every kick and movement through his wife's belly. It made him so happy and excited. Atticus liked to read to their baby before Sarah would go to bed. He found a book in his belongings that he vaguely remembered his own mother reading to him before her passing. This child would not have any grandparents. Atticus and Sarah would ensure that he or she would hear stories of them and would live on in their child. As much as Atticus tried to be happy and feel fulfilled with his impending fatherhood, he still felt such a big piece of him was missing without Tommy. He didn't know if he would ever feel whole again without him. Atticus tried to make Sarah's life easier by completing the household chores that she was usually responsible for. She was growing their child and deserved a break. He was spending more time with his wife because he loved to watch her belly grow as their child grew. However, he still preferred to work out with the chickens in solitude. The chickens didn't remind him what an awful person he was for condemning his best friend to a life void of love. He preferred their company because their eyes didn't long for him the way Sarah's did. Atticus was also trying to make his family more money before the baby arrived by collecting and selling eggs in town. There was an egg shortage in Henford on Bagley, so he was able to sell them for a generous sum. Part of him hoped that Tommy needed eggs for his household, so they could lock eyes again for the first time in years. Sadly, Atticus had yet to see Tommy in town. Sarah allowed her husband to complete the majority of her household chores and was grateful for his kindness. The one task she refused to give up was her cooking. Her meals tasted far better than anything Atticus tried to cook. Both Sarah and the baby preferred Sarah's cooking to Atticus's. Every meal Sarah made now was delicious and proficiently made. In an effort to make Sarah feel in better spirits during her pregnancy, Atticus built the matching rocking chairs to sit outside and enjoy the fresh air together. He didn't want her to feel alone while she was carrying their child. They seldom spoke during their daily rocking chair sessions, but neither seemed to mind. Sarah worked on knitting clothes for their baby while Atticus had his nose in a book. They were content, and Atticus kept his promise to her of being a companion. Although they had only been married a short time, Atticus felt like an old married couple that never had anything to talk about but were always together. He felt both comforted and horrified by the thought. If Atticus was missing Tommy a little extra that day, he would sit on the ground by Tommy's old painting easel. He envisioned that Tommy was painting something beautiful, and it made him feel closer than he was. Atticus desperately hoped that he wouldn't feel this amount of heartbreak forever. He loved Tommy, but he didn't want to feel miserable his entire life because he missed him. Sarah was finally in her third trimester. Their child could make their arrival at any time. Sarah was both very excited to meet the baby that she had been growing for months and scared of giving birth. She hoped her husband would be present and supportive when her labor came. He had been distant and emotionally unavailable since they got married, but she needed him to be there for her. The third trimester hit Sarah hard. She never felt rested, and her swollen body felt uncomfortable. She enjoyed the pregnancy thus far, but she was ready to have her child in the world. Atticus completed all of the tasks that required vigorous movement that would be strenuous for Sarah. He scrubbed and hung up the laundry in the final 3 months of Sarah's pregnancy. Sarah didn't want to be completely unhelpful, so she would replace the washtub's water after Atticus was finished. He was doing all tasks on their land, so it was the least she could do to contribute. Once in a blue moon, Sarah would get a surge of energy and could not sit still or be confined to her bed. She worked on her garden. Atticus did his best, but it was not up to her standards. She also tried to be helpful for her husband before she would be pulled away to do the child rearing. She fed the chickens and actually didn't mind being around the animals. She loved their land. During days when his wife insisted on being outside and exerting herself unnecessarily, Atticus cooked their dinner for the night so Sarah could relax and get off of her feet. He could at least do that much for her. Both Atticus and Sarah thoroughly enjoyed those nights. Sarah got to feel like a real wife with a doting husband. Atticus filled the gaping, Tommy-sized hole for at least a night. They both satisfied what the other needed. Despite Atticus's best efforts at keeping his distance with Sarah to save her from heartbreak, he was allured back to her because of her caring nature. Even if it were platonic, he loved Sarah and needed her. Sarah was just happy to have the connection. She felt so happy to finally have a husband who wanted her around. She was content. Sarah went into labor 3 days after her due date during the middle of the night. The contraction pain was harsh but manageable. Sarah managed to fall back to a restless sleep for a few hours in an attempt to prepare her mind and body for what was to come. She was ready to meet her baby, but was not looking forward to the pains of labor. She tried to enjoy what was her final sleep without their child in the world. It was both a scary and exciting thought. The pain of her first contraction after waking up was excruciating, and she immediately felt afraid of what was to come. Sarah tried to not wake her husband as she left their bedroom. All of the books that Atticus had read on childbirth suggested that the mother walked to get labor flowing, so that is what she did. Atticus woke up soon after Sarah left their bed and discovered that she was in early labor. He had a bit of a panic before he went into help mode for his wife. The walk that Sarah took seemed to help with the progression of her labor. She felt closer to needing to push. Atticus offered to sway with her to keep her moving. Sarah clung to Atticus, and other than the constant pain of labor, all of her worries washed away. Her dream had come true, and Atticus was a loving and attentive husband during the time she needed him most. Sarah had only been in labor for 5 hours, but suddenly felt the overwhelming urge to push. They traveled upstairs to their bedroom, and Sarah prepared herself to push. Atticus whispered words of encouragement to her. Sarah listened intently to Atticus's encouragement and his instructions. She positioned herself in a way that would be easier to push the baby out. She followed her body's cues and pushed when she felt she needed to. Atticus held her hand and caressed her face while she pushed. He was proud of her for going through unimaginable pain to bring their child in the world. He felt such admiration for his wife in this moment as he watched her give birth to their child. Sarah gave birth to a healthy baby girl. Both Mom and Dad were over the moon to have a girl. Sarah named the child Daphne after her mother. Her full name was Daphne Catherine Bennett to honor both of their late mothers. Sarah stared in awe of her little Daphne. Her heart was so full, and she didn't realize she could love someone so much. The agonizing pain of labor felt worth it as she held her beautiful child. Her life now had purpose and light. When Sarah handed Daphne to Atticus, he felt his entire world shift on its axis. He would move heaven and earth for his daughter, his girl. His entire life would be about making her happy and keeping her safe. Baby Daphne had stolen the hearts of her parents. They adjusted to being parents very easily and loved to dote on the newborn. Motherhood was very becoming for Sarah. She was extremely attentive and loving towards her daughter. Even the lack of sleep did not seem to faze her. She only wanted to be with her girl. Sarah and Daphne's breastfeeding journey was also going very well. Daphne was a good eater, and Sarah produced more than enough milk to nourish her child. This act blossomed their bond as well. Sarah allowed her husband to sleep during the majority of nights. No matter how much sleep Atticus got, he still woke up exhausted. His dreams were littered with memories of Tommy, and his sleep was restless. He poured everything he had into forming a loving and strong bond with his daughter. His favorite time of day was morning because he spent that time with Daphne. He loved seeing her tiny face smiling up at him. His life was filled with so much happiness and joy, and yet, part of him still felt sad. There was still a big piece of him missing. After completing his tasks for the day a few weeks after Daphne was born, Atticus decided to return to the forest where he spent his childhood with Tommy. He felt both deep sadness and nostalgia as he walked the path. Atticus stripped out of his clothes and waded in the water. This is where he and Tommy met for the first time, and his life changed forever. This river brought back so many memories with Tommy. He sat on the bench where they shared their first deep conversation. Tears welled in Atticus's eyes as he relived the memory. He concluded his walk down memory lane by stargazing in the spot they used to. They used to talk about the future and fear for it. They talked about the dread of marrying women. There they were. Or at least Atticus was, as he didn't know what Tommy was doing now. He was married to a woman. It wasn't as horrible as he envisioned it to be back then. He decided that he did like his life with Sarah and Daphne. Sarah was beginning to find balance in her life again. Her little Daphne was always her first priority, but she was able to resume her duties as a homemaker and tend to her garden once again. This balance made her very happy and allowed her to once again feel useful to her husband. One thing that Sarah could not and did not want to get used to were the bees that Atticus started catching in order to collect fresh honey. She was stung every time she was outside, and it frustrated her. All of her frustrations were washed away whenever she went inside and held Daphne in her arms. She was growing like a weed and doing new things every single day. It made Sarah so proud to watch Daphne discover the world. It made her sad that Daphne would soon grow into her next stage of life. She enjoyed the newborn stage and always cuddling and rocking her little girl. Atticus had returned from the forest a changed man. He would always love Tommy. His priority was now his family and providing for them. He couldn't let the memory of his first love ruin his life with his family. He focused on tending to the chickens because it is what made his family the most money. He wanted Sarah and Daphne to be able to live comfortably and never have to worry about finances. That was his job. Once in a blue moon, Sarah made herself look pretty. She focused most of her energy on Daphne, but still wanted to be the woman Atticus married, to be desired by him. Atticus was working so hard for them, so Sarah was responsible for all of Daphne's care during the day. She didn't mind. Atticus would come inside and check on his girls from time to time. Sarah liked to show Daphne off to her husband and give him a detailed account of the new things the baby had done that day. Atticus was a proud father. After Sarah was completely healed from childbirth, she resumed the more strenuous tasks such as scrubbing the dirty laundry. It returned her sense of purpose in their household. She just wanted to make Atticus happy. She collected fresh honey for Atticus to sell in town. Working with bees was new to her, and she wasn't sure how to interact with them. Apparently what she was doing was wrong because she always got stung after retrieving the honey. She wished her husband would do this task because it was her least favorite thing. Hanging out the damp laundry to dry was her favorite task because she was able to admire the clean, not stained clothes she worked diligently on. She got to see the fruits of her labor. Atticus made coffee in the middle of the day because he would begin to feel tired. He was still not sleeping well and dreamed of Tommy despite his best efforts not to. So he drank coffee to be alert and get through the day. One of the only things in life that Atticus enjoyed was drinking his afternoon coffee while washing the day's hard work off of his body. It was the only time he ever felt relaxed. He wished he knew how to shut off his brain. Atticus felt true happiness when he held his daughter. She was a spitting image of his wife. She was beautiful and he loved her with his entire heart. She was the one thing in life that he was proud of. After Sarah woke up in the morning, Atticus made her coffee and they sat on their couch and watched the sunrise. They talked about life and all of the things they were grateful for. This was a bonding time for them. They parented their daughter so well together, but rarely had time for themselves as a married couple. Atticus found himself missing Sarah even though she was right there. He still hated himself for marrying her and blocking her chance at romantic love, but he appreciated their friendship. She was a special person and his life was happier with her in it. He enjoyed listening to her gush about their daughter. Seeing Sarah so happy and content with their life together brought him both joy and relief. Atticus was caught completely off guard when Sarah asked if they could start trying for another baby. He thought he had more time to prepare for their intimacy with her, but he couldn't deny her this happiness. They had not been intimate since she found out she was pregnant with Daphne. Atticus found his thoughts roaming to Tommy and their beautiful experience. It was the only way he could be with Sarah. She wanted another baby, and this was the only way he could give that to her. He hated himself for it. Whenever they finished trying for a baby, Atticus would go into Daphne's room to remind himself that the goal was to have another baby as perfect as she was. Daphne deserved brothers and sisters to grow up with. Sarah went inside Daphne's room after Atticus to feed the child. She hoped to have many other children because she loved being a mother. It was the most rewarding part of her life and what she was destined to do. Now that Atticus was being intimate with his wife again, he was not sleeping well. He left their bed in the early morning hours and found tasks to busy himself with before she and the baby were awake. It was his duty and responsibility as her husband to give her more children. The marital act made him uneasy and uncomfortable. He tried to block it out by making himself useful to both his household and to Henford on Bagley. His chickens had become a staple in the town. It had also made his family good money. The increased demand for bedroom antics with his wife had caused a change in his personality. He was now unflirty and was repulsed by romance. Before every time with Sarah, he had to give himself a pep talk in the mirror to stop crying and feeling uneasy. He made sure to get these feelings up beforehand so he didn't hurt his wife's feelings. Sarah and Atticus were with each other in this way once a week, sometimes more. Atticus figured that the more they are intimate in a short period of time, the better their chances were to become with child again. Before Sarah and Atticus knew it, Daphne was aging into an infant. Their daughter was growing up too fast for their liking, but were excited to see the type of girl she would grow up to be and to watch her continue to discover the world. Daphne's infant trait is cautious. Sarah was such a proud and doting mother. Her little Daphne brought her so much happiness. It became Sarah's mission to coach Daphne through her milestones. She and Atticus were not having any luck becoming pregnant this time around, so she focused all of her energy on being the best mum to age a daughter. She desperately wanted a large family, but if she was only blessed with Daphne, and she would make sure her little girl was the happiest child who ever lived. Sarah took charge of the child rearing, so Atticus volunteered to put Daphne to bed every night. Atticus enjoyed this time with his daughter. He whispered words of love to her, kissed her goodnight, and willed bad dreams away. Sarah got back into her adventurous cooking. She had neglected trying out new recipes since Daphne was born, but now that she was getting older, Sarah had more time to do things she enjoyed again. Unfortunately, her new recipe did not agree with her stomach, and she rushed to the bathroom to vomit up the contents of her stomach. Afterwards, she diligently cleaned the toilet, and it dawned on her that this was how it started when she was pregnant with Daphne. She desperately hoped there was a baby growing in her belly once again. She cleaned the kitchen with a newfound excitement and wonder. Her husband would be so pleased to know she was with child. She would wait a few weeks to see if she would miss her monthly before sharing her suspicions with Atticus. Daphne was a very happy child. She rarely cried and always smiled widely and giggled loudly when in the presence of either of her parents. She wanted for nothing and was doted on by her mother and father. The child was a fast learner too. She was reaching her milestones faster than other children her age. It was a source of pride for Sarah and Atticus. Their daughter was truly the light of their lives. Sarah enjoyed playing with little Daphne. Atticus built their daughter wooden toes to play with, and Daphne looked at the toes with bright eyes full of wonder. The child's smile was always the highlight of Sarah's day. Atticus had suffered in silence for several weeks. He he was content with his life, but still could not shake the longing he felt for his one true love. One night, he wrote yet another letter to Tommy that detailed his feelings. Atticus had obtained Tommy's father's address from a farmer in town. That farm man had recently passed away, so if Atticus was ever going to get in contact with Tommy, now would be the time.